And now we have to be somber.
Is that the way you're going to start the town hall recording, Mr. Gilson?
Famous last words.
Well, I have 3:31 on the clock, so we are ready to start whenever you are, Rick.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and we're mindful that it's a beautiful Tuesday afternoon, and we're going to work to be as quick as we can in going through everything. Deanna has shared the screen, so you should see a gray screen with AS2A Town Hall on it, as well as whatever window configuration you have that allows you to see everybody. We had somewhere in the neighborhood of 130 people sign up to be here. You can see we currently have somewhere in around 56 participants, more coming in. Deanna, if you'd be so kind as to advance the slide. Deanna is playing the role of Vanna for a little bit.
You bet.
So welcome very much. We do ask you to keep your microphones on mute. There will be a time to ask some questions. When it comes time to ask questions, we'd invite you to use the reactions button at the bottom of your Zoom window and click on the raised hand. That'll bring you up to the top of the participants list for us as hosts, and then we'll be able to answer those questions or take those questions and try to answer those questions in order. It is being recorded and will be available on the AS2A YouTube channel. So, I am Rick Gilson, past president of the Alberta Schools Athletic Association, and we're joined today by John Payton, AS2A Executive Director, and Deanna Mitro, our Director of Provincial Championships and Member Services with the AS2A. And we're very pleased to have with us as well the outstanding, amazing Marvin Dobish, sports consultant from Sector Development Sport. This is just a short title. Sector Development, Sport, Physical Activity and Recreation, Alberta Culture, Multiculturalism, and the Status of Women. So Marvin's hardly busy at all because he's got a tiny little title to go with there, and we'll be here from Marvin a little bit later. What we're going to attempt to cover are clarifying the lines of authority for establishing return of play, the AS2A return to play documents, things for ADs, modified coaching requirements, and as you can see here on the list, joint school teams, distributed learning, eligibility, fees, seasons of play, tournaments and sanctioning provincial championships. And then we'll hear from Marvin and future town hall and any questions. It's an interesting list. It's a list that has dominated conversations for us on executive for the last 15, 16, 17 months. And boy, it's exciting to see possibility of return on the immediate horizon. So just to keep this as absolutely simple as possible, it does not matter what any particular sports body says. It doesn't even really matter entirely what we say. The order for returning to business is as simple as Alberta Health Services at the top, and then superintendents, and then principals, and then our policies kick into play. We can have all the policies we want. In the end, superintendents determine whether a division is ready to go, and superintendents have the ability to give that final say to principals, and then it flows from there. And if we keep that order simple and clear for us, then we can be very excited with the announcements that might come out of any of the provincial governing sport bodies, Football Alberta, volleyball, basketball, cross country, handball, whatever organization out there. They can have some guidelines and some, here's what you can and can't do. In the end, we need to remember that a superintendent has the ability to say, notwithstanding all that, we're not going to do, or we're going to do. So that's as simple as I can put that. And with that, I think we'll be turning it over to now Deanna and John. And Deanna, I'll take care of admitting from here on out while you're working on the other stuff.
Thank you, Rick. And hi, everybody. And I bet you're all looking forward to the end of the school year and a real break from the back and forth and so on. So just as an update on the types of things that we've done and where we're going moving forward. So I did make some of these comments at the zone meetings, but I'll reiterate them for those who might not have made those meetings. So back in the fall of last year, we did create a safe return to sport guideline. It was very detailed, covered everything from getting into the gyms and PPE and cohorts and all those sorts of things. Then we had to modify that as the government of Alberta was modifying their guidelines, which we did in October. There weren't a lot more changes to make after that because a lot of schools were shut down for school athletics. Particularly the larger boards pretty much for the whole year, although there were some rural boards that were fortunate enough to be able to get some athletics in, which was terrific. Over the last number of months, probably from, say January through March, April, the staff, largely led by Deanna and helped by Michelle Ross at Edmonton Metro, and then with input from the rest of the staff and the executive, came up with a proposed guideline to Alberta Health Services around how we would hope they would see school sport recommencing. And so a document was created to give to them using the same format as was used by universities and colleges and junior hockey when the government put out documents for them. And of course we had things like cohorts and so on, and that went to them back in April. But since that time, obviously there have been some changes. So the document that we created for them may now be moot. It may not be something they end up putting out, but I would think moving into the fall, there will be guidelines that come out. We're just not sure what they're going to look like because of the way things are changing, how rapidly they are changing. But so we are waiting for that direction from the government, as noted in the first bullet in the second section on this page. And we've had communications with Alberta Health Services. What we're hoping is that they will help us have a communique with Alberta Education so that we can have some sort of mirror document, school athletics that accompanies the return to school document. We're not overly confident in that occurring. Alberta Education typically doesn't take on board school sport things because they don't fund school sport. So, but we're hoping for some sort of positive relationship that allows maybe a sister document to go out to them. But the jury's out on that, whether or not that will happen. So the other thing that has been happening in time or over the last number of weeks is that various provincial sport organisations have been releasing their guidelines for return to sport for their activity. So and this is the same as in the fall, rather than the ASAA recreating the wheel, creating something for basketball or something for football or whatever, it's those provincial sport orgs that are putting out the documents that we rely on for their expertise in those sports. So over the course of the next week or so, we'll gather as many of those documents together as we can, and we will we'll put them on our website under the COVID-19 section. So when you go to the ASAA site, you'll see in the top bar COVID-19, and inside that you'll see some links to provincial sport org docs, what's there right now. Some of them will be old or older because there hasn't been a lot of change, but we will work towards getting those updated for you as soon as we can. The other thing that's been occurring is at a staff level, we're just looking at the various protocols and procedures around provincial championships and developing the guidance for hosts. One of the challenges, of course, that we will face ongoing is that depending on how much relaxation there is at the government level will impact what we can or cannot recommend. The other thing that Rick referred to earlier, of course, is that if a school district decides that they're going to go into the fall with restrictions in place, then those restrictions are the ones that have to get followed during provincials or any other activity that occurs in that school. But that will be at the discretion of the school districts, and that's something that we have no authority over. I'll pass it over to Deanna to talk about some of the get-aheads for athletic directors and coaches for the coming year.
Perfect. Thanks, John. And hello, everyone. Good afternoon. So a few key reminders for you as you're starting to prepare for the next school year. We will have a form that is going to be distributed tomorrow morning to collect contact information for your school as to who is supposed to have appropriate access within the sport registration system. So for your athletic directors, for your principals, we want to collect that information from you now so that we can set up the SRS, have you all lined up and ready to go in the fall. So please make sure you complete that form as soon as you see it sent out tomorrow. Another change that is going to be coming up for the fall of 2022 that we wanted to make everyone aware of now so that you have a year to begin planning and begin preparing for this is that there will be some changes in the sport registration system for procedurally how transfers are managed. So at the moment in the sport registration system at the receiving school end of things, you as the athletic director can go in and initiate a transfer, fill in all the paperwork, all the required documents, send it over to your, which then gets sent to the sending school principal for review and confirmation. This is going to be changing starting fall of 2022. Now I'd like to state that again, fall of 2022. So the next school year, nothing will be changing. It will be remaining the same procedurally, but starting for the fall of 2022, athletic directors will no longer be the ones responsible for initiating the transfers. That is all going to fall on the school administrators. So please ensure that if you are an athletic director listening in, you are communicating that to your administrator as soon as possible so that they are ready for that change come the following school year. Another reminder as well is that school registration is due by October 10th. So please ensure that you are getting your school registration in the sport registration system in the fall done by that point in time. Another update that we have for you is just on some modified coaching requirements for the 21-22 school year. Now, in a normal year, the policy requirement is listed on the left-hand column there, and there are a few changes that we're going to be applying for the 21-22 school year that the ASAA Board of Governors approved just to alleviate some of the pressures and the stresses placed on coaches. We know that a lot of you are going to be really struggling to get started and get back on your feet after what is essentially 18 months to 2 years of no athletics. And we want to reduce as many barriers as possible for participation, and that includes engaging your coaches. So the modified requirements for a 1 year only for the 21-22 school year are that the coaching school sport redefining winning module is normally required to be completed by October 10th and completed prior to your school registration. For the next school year, it is going to be due by June 30th. So you have the entire school year to have one member of staff in your school complete that module. That module is available in the locker, as are the rest of our modules. The next modified requirement is the Bylaws and Policies course. Normally, one person or one team official on every school sport team has to complete this course prior to any inter-school sport being played. However, the modified version of this for next year is that the Bylaws and Policies course needs to be completed by June 30th. So your coaches will have the entire year to complete that module. It's also really important to note that the ASAA Bylaws and Policies course is being rebuilt for the locker. The content is being reviewed, the module is being rebuilt, and we will have a brand new version of it ready for you in the locker. It is still under construction, and we are expecting to have it complete around January of 2022. So we won't have it available anytime soon for you. So there's no need to worry about that module in the locker at this point in time. And then the final change that we have is that every team official, so coach, assistant, teacher, sponsor, etc., is required to complete Making Headway, which is the CAC concussion course, by 1 month into the season of play. Nothing is changing as far as this requirement. So we are still requiring coaches and all team officials to complete that course. ASAA is not going to be requiring any proof of completion, though, for registration. So it's solely going to be the responsibility of individual schools to ensure that your coaches are in compliance with this expectation. So you do still need to register your coaches in the SRS. You just simply won't need any sort of proof of completion of this module in order to register them in the SRS. So again, they still have to take the course. You just won't need to have it as a part of registration. There is a a public NCCP transcript feature available, which I encourage all of you to take advantage of as athletic directors or school principals. If you Google NCCP public transcript, all you have to provide in there for information is your coach's NCCP number and their last name, and you will have access to their NCCP transcript directly that way. And I'm happy to answer more questions about that later when we get to the questions section. But for now, I will turn it over to John. Oops, wrong button. Sorry about that, John. I'll just pull that presentation back up there for you.
Off mute. That's another $1, Rick. While Deanna's getting the slide ready again, we've been receiving some questions around joint school teams and distributed learning, in that there are some school districts that have opened up what they're calling home learning. I mean, we've had home education for a long time. We've had other forms of distributed learning, home education, but there are some that because of COVID have opened up more of those programs. I did reach out to the College of Alberta School Superintendents yesterday to try and get some input from them on whether or not this is widespread, if they see some of these moves in the rural areas as being temporary or permanent. But just some clarification though, if there is a program within your school jurisdiction that involves online learning, then in order for a student who is involved in online learning to be involved in a school sport activity, the online learning school must join the ASAA as a member. What I was trying to get back from CAS, the Superintendent Association, was their position on a school versus a program. But my inclination is that our executive will expect that any program, if it's not formally a school within a district, will also have to join as a member of the ASAA, just as distributed learning schools do and home education schools do, in order for their students to be eligible. So the first thing is a school must become a member of the ASAA. Secondly, the combined population of the students in the school that's accepting the student from the distributed learning school or the home education school. So the school who's accepting them will need to add all of the students who reside in the attendance area of their school and are part of the online school. So and they have to send a declaration to us for that purpose. Very rarely does it change the classification level of a school, but depending on how close one is to the bubble, it might change it. And then if a student does happen to be registered in more than one educational institution, let's say there are some students who are taking some courses at a brick and mortar school, they're also taking some courses in home education or distributed learning, wherever they have the majority of their courses is where they are considered to be going to school. So if a student is 60% at your school and then taking 40% of online courses, then they're fine to compete for you. If they're 40% at your school, 60% of online courses, then the online school has to become a member. The numbers in your catchment area for that school have to be added to your population for classification purposes. So it's no different to any other year, but we are getting more questions on this because there are more students whose families have chosen online learning for them. Moving to the next slide, and I'll take questions again at the end, just as Deanna had noted. So if you have those, just hold on to those. So returning grade 12s for next year are not eligible to play. We have received this question a number of times. We've clarified it at every single zone meeting, clarified it at our board meeting. We've put documents out to our board and to our membership saying that there is no automatic second year for second year grade 12s next year. Of course, we do have an appeals process, and based on the personal circumstances of any individual student, whether it's a second transfer, a denied transfer, a fourth year, we do have an appeals committee that will be dealing with any appeals that come forward. But those appeals have to go through the SRS in the formal appeal process. So exceptional circumstances or extenuating circumstances are usually the types of things that are considered. There are no guarantees on any appeal. So, and at this point as well, this has been a question we have been receiving around vaccination. Are we going to require vaccination? Are we going to be checking certificates? No. The ASAA is not going to be doing that, of course, knowing that most of our events are hosted within school jurisdictions. If a specific school jurisdiction has a requirement around vaccinations or vaccinated certificates, that would be their prerogative to require there to be proof shown. I haven't heard of any board that's requiring it right now, and particularly with kids under 12 not being vaccinated. I think it would be pretty hard for any board to mandate, vaccinations. But that will be a decision that's made at the school district level and not by the ASAA. So, and a reminder, as Rick said, whatever the school districts decide, they override whatever we say. So there is a transfer memo that we had sent out as well, and just wanted you to make sure you're aware of that. I mean, for the most part, we don't expect an awful lot of transfer activity in the fall of this year. We've had a year and a half without any school sport, and most of those that have transferred out of their school typically have gone not to another school, but they've gone to an online learning system, and they will come back. So if you had a student that was at your school, they went to online learning, they came back to your school, and they have played no sports from the time they left to the time they came back, you don't need to complete a transfer. So as long as they're in your school, they're in your school. So, and we also indicated that any student who had transferred by the beginning of February 15th of 2021, their transfers will automatically be approved, and any transfers after February 15th, 2021 would need to go through the normal process for transfers. Next one is membership fees. So I have been mentioning at each of the zone meetings that there will be a rebate on fees. So at the moment, we're not discounting the fees because we don't know what the surplus is going to be. But whatever surplus we do have will be returned to our schools by the way of membership fee rebates. We've connected with our auditors that do our audit every year. Our fiscal year end is August 31. So it means that it takes a while for the auditors. We have boxes of things that go to them, boxes of files. So it takes them a while to get through all of those, but they've committed to us to try and complete that by mid-October. And if they can do that, we may end up sort of pushing the deadline by which the schools typically pay their zones, their membership fees, so that we can incorporate into the fee whatever discount it's going to be to the member school. So the AGM last week, I presented a surplus estimating at this point, because of largely Canadian emergency wage subsidy and some funds we got from the provincial government, which came down from Heritage Canada, we're looking at about a 90,000 surplus right now. We don't know if we'll be above or below that. Depends what happens in the next couple of months with the Canadian emergency wage subsidy, and that subsidy will conclude, I believe, at the end of August. But as soon as we can get that information out to you, we can. The one thing we're not certain of, though, and this may impact our surplus for the current year, is that we have not yet had our operational funding from the Ministry of Multiculturalism, Culture, Multiculturalism and the Status of Women confirmed.
Yeah.
So we're just waiting to see where that ends up. So we're staying positive, but we just, again, it's one of those we don't know, despite us asking. On to the next one, seasons of play. So tournaments and sanctioning. Just some clarification around seasons of play. So at this point, we are proceeding into the 21-20 school year as if it were a normal school year for the purposes of ASAA, Provincial Championship competition. As I mentioned earlier, we know there might be some restrictions in certain boards, but we're planning on a full round of provincials. And of course, there may be some requirements around spectators at that time. But when it comes to the hosting of tournaments, there's a lot of questions that have come to us about, can I host a tournament, or can somebody else host a tournament? Do I have to get written sanctioning for that tournament? So if you're a school and you are hosting only Alberta schools, then no sanctioning is required. You still have to follow ASAA policy, so you can't include kids that are not eligible, or alumni teams or those sorts of things, but you don't have to fill it in your paperwork. If you live if your school is in what we call the one of the border schools, it's typically roughly about 100 kilometers in from the border, I think, of Saskatchewan and BC. you're covered under what they call the blanket policy. So you can compete with schools from BC or schools from Saskatchewan, depending on where you are, if you're in that blanket corridor, let's say, without requiring a written sanction as well. Now, at the moment, Saskatchewan still has a moratorium on allowing schools from other parts of the country to come into their province. But my guess is that by the time we get to August, that will probably be relaxed. If you have teams coming into to Alberta to a tournament that you are hosting from another province or the US or another country, that's when written sanctioning is required. And if you are traveling outside of the province, I'm not sure if we'll see a lot of that this year, but if you're traveling outside of the province, it's incumbent upon you to make sure that the host of the event you're going to gets the right sanctioning forms completed. And depending if it's within Canada, it's between us and our counterpart organizations. If it's in the US, it's between us and the National Federation of High Schools in the US, paperwork. And that's, again, an ongoing process. But for most of you that don't leave the province, don't have teams coming in from outside of the province, as long as you follow the policies, there's nothing you have to do with tournaments. The only sport where a non-school entity is allowed to hold an ASAA sanctioned tournament or sanctioned event is in cheerleading. And the only reason that is there is because the cheer companies or agencies, for the most part, are the only ones who have the safety equipment and matting sufficient to make an event as safe as we need it to be. Many schools don't host events anymore in cheerleading. So that's the only circumstance. Universities and colleges can invite you in to participate in events. They have to make sure they're following ASAA policy. They have to apply for a written sanction. So if you do happen to be already scheduled to go to an event, say the U of A, U of C, U of L, please check with one of our staff or check our website to make sure that that event has been sanctioned or has been given sanctioning approval by the ASAA. On to Provincials, Deanna.
Thanks, John. And just as a intro to our newest staff member, Trevor Aiello. Trevor is the manager for all of our tournament sanctioning. So Trevor's the person to contact in the event if you have any questions about sanctioning or tournament submissions. And as John mentioned, please ensure you check the tournament listing section of our website. If you have submitted a tournament and you're not seeing it pop up right away, please ensure you allow 3 to 4 business days for us to just simply process the tournament, review the information, and post it on the website. As for Provincial Championships, so we are very excited to hopefully be returning to what will be a full year of regular sport for this fall season. And as a result, we are planning our Provincial Championships accordingly. So there will be some specific parameters around provincials that are going to be determined in the future, just depending on the guidance or any guidance that comes out of the government of Alberta, as well as parameters that are placed by school jurisdictions or individual school administrations. So we've been getting a lot of questions such as, will there be spectators allowed at provincials? And the answer to that is, first and foremost, it will depend on what the government of Alberta allows. And then second, it will be dependent on what the school jurisdiction and school administration of an event host for a provincial championship allows. So if we have an event that is being hosted at a certain school and the school jurisdiction does not allow any sort of spectators, then no spectators would be permitted at that championship. So there is a lot of unknowns as far as what will and will not be allowed at provincials that are to be determined. But as of right now, we are planning for a full return to provincial championships and making modifications as required. And at this time now, I will invite our SPAR representative, Marvin Dobish, to speak on behalf of the government of Alberta.
Great, thanks a lot, Dee. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon. It's like a fantastic day here just outside of Edmonton, and I'm sure it is across the province. So don't want to take too much time, but I wanted to just say thanks to the ASAA for inviting me to the town hall this afternoon. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to give a quick overview and update on the Alberta's Open for Summer plan. I'm sure most of you have all heard about the plan, and then I'll stick around for some Q&A as we move into the final couple of sections for the afternoon. So the Open for Summer plan was developed by the government of Alberta back in May to safely ease restrictions in 3 stages as provincial vaccination targets are achieved and hospitalization numbers are on the decline. So back on June the 10th, we moved into stage 2, which is the current stage that we're operating in. And then as of last Thursday, we reached that magic threshold number of 70% of all Albertans with 1 vaccination, thus allowing us to be able to move into stage 3, which will occur on July the 1st. And so that was confirmed by Premier Kenney last Friday. And right now, government officials within the Ministry of Health are putting together a series of recommendations of what will be occurring as we move into stage 3. So we'll see more information on that as we get closer to approaching Canada Day next Thursday. And then just as a quick update, as of yesterday, we're now at 70.8% of all Albertans aged 12 and over with 1 dose of the vaccination. And then we're now over the 30% mark, 30.4 actually, which are fully vaccinated. So that number is quickly rising and certainly is hinged upon distribution and shipments of the vaccinations into the province of Alberta. So with stage 2 right now, that started on June the 10th, as I mentioned, currently indoor and outdoor sports have resumed with no restrictions. And now when I say no restrictions, there certainly are a number of guidelines that we should be followed, including maintaining distancing and masking while outside of the actual field of play for indoor sports. And Deanna was just mentioning about seating capacity. So for right now, for indoor sports and for outdoor sports that have fixed seating, so bleachers, it's 1/3 of the normal seating capacity is allowed at this point in time. We expect that to change for stage 3, and we'll look to see what those numbers are. Also, for that 0 to 11 age category of sport participation and competition at this point in time, sports have been asked and suggested to form cohorts of up to 50 because those individuals have yet to be vaccinated. So they're just putting some extra precautions in place. We'll see if that continues with stage 3 or not. I would think that probably it will be a recommendation moving forward just to try to do some extra mitigation. And right now, basically what they're indicating is that the number of 50 applies to participants. It does not count when it comes to coaches and other volunteers associated with the actual team. So the stage 2 guidelines, I've posted a link here on the slide. Those are available on the Alberta BizConnect guidance portal site. And then we should see that stage 3 document probably popping up either late next week or right after the Canada Day long weekend. So then as of next Thursday, what they're saying is that all provincial restrictions will be lifted, including the general provincial indoor masking mandate. And so right now you're hearing a lot of information in the news with respect to municipalities. Some will continue with their own masking mandates as required in limited and specific settings. So we saw the announcement come out yesterday about Calgary extending to July the 5th. And I know that Edmonton City Council was meeting this afternoon. I've yet to see what their announcement was with respect to masking moving forward. We will potentially be seeing an update to that stage 2 SPAR guidance document. And basically, it'll be a series of recommendations that will continue to look at minimizing the risk of the transmission of COVID for the foreseeable future. So we still could see some things, suggested around masking, distancing, and then also some pieces around, facility operators as well. And then John alluded to this a little bit earlier, but we should see at some point in time, fairly soon, Alberta Education coming up with an updated school guidance plan. And so I know that many of you will be looking for that document, as will your senior administrators, to see what changes will be coming into place for the fall school year starting in September. So I would say right now, just as I liaise and network with the broader provincial sport community, there's a sense of cautious optimism, throughout the province right now as we look to a safe return to sport. I think, we're certainly seeing a lot of activity has now resumed since June the 10th at the local and community levels. And we should continue to see an upswing across the province over the summer. And, included in that, we're also going to start to see some interprovincial competition, I think, starting in July. John mentioned about Saskatchewan, about some of their restrictions that are still in place, but both BC and Saskatchewan will be lifting some of their interprovincial travel restrictions as they move into the next stages of their respective plans as well. So we will see, at the community and provincial level, teams traveling across those provincial borders, be it in some of those sports like baseball and soccer and lacrosse here over the summertime. So just quickly to close, I just wanted to say on behalf of the ministry and SPAR, we certainly appreciate everything that you've done, over this past school year to contribute to school sport within your communities throughout Alberta. The past 16 months has been unlike any other time that we've ever experienced. And so hopefully, as we move forward, we know that students and families and all of you are hopeful for a return to school sport in the fall time. Over the summer, I'm going to continue to work and support the ASAA as best we possibly can, as we know that there are numerous factors, moving parts, underlying implications and decisions that will come into play to make all of this a reality. So as we become aware of any of the information, we'll continue to update George and Rick and John and Deanna and the whole team so that, come September, we've got, hopefully a pretty solid plan in place. And, nobody's more excited than all of us to have that opportunity to get back and working with student athletes come September. So that's all for now. I'll stick around for questions and back over to who's going to be next, John or Deanna, with the final slide.
That will be Mr. Gilson.
Oh, it's Rick, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Very good to sort of see you in the shadows there, Marvin. Backlighting, it's the demon of Zoom screens. So, ladies and gentlemen, just a reminder for questions, and I see Ken had a question. Hit the reactions button, click a hand up, and that'll bring you up to the top. And Ken, did you still have a question, or did the answer come to your mind by inspiration?
No, there's not much in the mind right now. So it was more of a comment for Marvin. And it's good to see you again, Marvin. It's been a number of years. But one of the big frustrations of being in a school and being in club and community sport was the differences that came out all the time, and the ASAA would have to backtrack and say, well, this is what the clubs and the communities are doing, and this is what the schools are doing. And I know that was early in the year, and in September and October, where their kids had to choose club sport over school sport and things like that. I'm just hoping that your group, Marvin, took all those considerations into mind, and it won't, if we have to go that route, that it won't be a repeat in September or October. Could you comment just a little bit on that for us?
Yeah, Ken, it's good to see you as well. Your point is well taken, and certainly, in numerous conversations that George and John and Deanna and myself we've had, both internally as well with Alberta Health and with the broader SPAR group, we've brought those considerations forward to Alberta Health and to all of their leadership as well. And certainly, it hasn't been perfect. And we know that it hasn't been perfect. And certainly there were some situations in which families were put into that situation where they had to make choices. I think, moving forward, it's important that we see this school guidance document that's going to come out here sooner than later. And that's going to help try to inform us as we look to move forward, for the start of the school year. I think, that when we shared the document that John alluded to earlier with Alberta Health, we received a little bit of preliminary feedback on it. But, that the feeling is that unless we start to see a real upswing in hospitalizations and case numbers again, and potentially, hopefully not, a fourth wave, then it's going to be pretty much back to normal here come September. But as John's alluded to, and Rick, with the lines of authority, it's really going to be up to your superintendents and principals to determine what are they going to allow and what are they not going to allow moving forward. And I think, it's going to be a period of transition for sure as we hit September with our fall sports, be it football and cross country and golf. And I'm hoping that as we settle into the winter time, that we're back to fairly close, as long as the superintendents and principals are willing to, accept some of that risk, but then also to have some of that experience to see, what's transpired over the fall period of time. So, a bit of a long answer, but it certainly hasn't gone unnoticed. And, I'll maybe ask John if he just wanted to add anything to that or not at this point.
No, I think you did a good job with it, Marvin. I don't think I have anything I need to add to that. But thank you.
Thank you very much for that question, Ken. Leah, you're up next.
Yeah, I just had a quick question about provincials, primarily fall provincials. So I know we said we're planning to go ahead with it and maybe making modifications as we need. Is there any potential of, I know you said you're sticking to the same seasons of play, but is there a potential of adjusting dates for provincials just to allow for, like we just talked about, like hopefully by the winter things are back to normal. But I know like for Calgary senior high school athletics, they're talking about, there might potentially be delayed starts and they want everyone to kind of get back in school and things like that. And there might be a delay to league games actually starting. So just if that's the case, if some jurisdictions are starting a little bit later and not able to get in all their games and things like that, would there potentially be the ability to adjust the fall provincial dates?
You want to jump in, Deanna, or do you want me to handle that? I'll start. Okay. So at this point, the discussion at the board level hasn't gone, or at the executive level hasn't gone towards a modification of the seasons. There was some discussion, but no formal decisions in the sport of rugby for safety reasons, with concerns being that most of the kids who play rugby at high school are playing rugby for the first time, and some thought about whether or not there should be a period of time before the rugby season starts to allow them to learn the skills and drills of the game. And possibly extend the front end, but there hasn't been a formal decision of that. I think the general thought is that just get the kids out there doing multi-sport activities, just so they're starting to build up their strength, their flexibility, their spatial awareness, and so on. But in terms of consideration for changing the seasons of play, because some areas might be starting later than others, has not been a consideration. It's almost like a follow-on effect. So if you move one, what happens to the next? If you move that, what happens to the next, and so on. So it might just be that if some school districts start late, they will just have a shorter season in those sports. That's the way it is right now. There's been no formal request to the executive committee for consideration of changing provincial championship dates at this time, Leah.
Okay, yeah, I was just thinking more for the fall, like just because I think like Marvin mentioned, hopefully by the winter things are kind of just in the normal swing of things. But like if one, like for football or cross country, for example, if they're starting like a month later and then, might not have time to get in a league and semifinals and a city champ, like it just might be tough for some jurisdictions that would be potentially attending provincials to get all of that in if they're still on those regularly scheduled dates. So maybe if there was, I think if it's one outlier jurisdiction, it would make sense, but maybe if there's multiple zones that are delayed, then I think everyone might kind of be in the same boat.
And that would be, I think, a matter of us trying to find out from the Superintendents Association, if they're able to get that information from the members, what considerations they're giving to the fall.
Right.
In terms of the cross country championships, the difficulty with where it is right now, third weekend in October, is we go a little later and we're getting into snow territory.
Yeah.
So I can't see it moving. Can't see the golf moving again. Both of those are very largely weather dependent. If there were to be any movement in volleyball or football, football in particular is a very big animal to deal with, because they're using Commonwealth Stadium in Edmonton. Volleyball all over. Rick, I'll just sort of throw it back to you. And you look like you're.
I would suggest, Leah, that there's probably going to be some need for thought around compressing the league schedules as opposed to moving the provincial dates for those outdoor sports. Whether volleyball is in the same boat or not, I can't speak to that. But in Alberta, the notion of having high school football pushed back to the second week of December, um, I've had the frostbite before. I'm not too sure that would be, I'll borrow the pun, warmly received. So I suspect more to the point, leagues will have to look at compressing their schedules to hit those anchor dates if we're able to proceed. That's just food for thought, but that's where the wiggle room is.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. We're going to go next to Joel Shalafu. Joel, you're up. Open.
Yeah. Oh, can you guys hear me?
Yep. You're
Great.
good.
Good to see everybody. I actually have two questions, and maybe I missed something earlier, but one's just in regards to if we're leaving it up to superintendents, say in private schools, it'd be more of our head of schools or whatever, to decide upon our return to play and whatnot, and leave that in their comfort. Is there any sort of penalty or consequence for maybe paying league fees later? And if it is getting pushed back because we're talking about the rebate, is that something that's been taken into consideration? Because I know a few years ago there was, or I guess when this whole thing started, the talk about, well, we are still expected to pay full fees, and if we don't, there was some sort of sanctioning or not being involved in the ASAA the following year. So I just want to clarify that and make sure that I'm giving the right information back to my administration. And then secondly, just the reasoning behind going in the year 2022 to full principal involvement on the transfers. I know that can be a bit difficult for some administrators that are already incredibly busy, and they look for ASADs to take those loads off. So with that, giving them that paperwork now just adds to their plate. And I'm just kind of wondering the reasoning behind that.
First question, and thanks, Joel. Now, when you say league fees, do you mean league fees or do you mean ASAA membership?
Sorry, ASAA fees, John. My apologies.
Right. So, we've had long discussions and put out a couple of memos on membership fees. So if your administration are wondering about the fees, just grab the memos, have a look at those, share them with them if you haven't already. As an organization, we need to be able to continue to function. We need to be able to pivot when the time is go to get school sport going. And the only way that can happen is if we have the support of the member schools in paying the membership fees. And if, as we've indicated, with a surplus inspected this year, the goal always was this year that if we did have a surplus, that we would be providing it back to the schools. And that will be happening as well. So if some leagues happen to get started a little late because the school decides or a district decides, there'll be no change to the fees. They'll still have to pay the fees that are available that would be paid by any other school. So that won't change. In terms of the transfers, ultimately it always has been the principal's responsibility to do registrations and transfers. They're the ultimate authority in the school. It's become a practice that the athletic directors have done it. And we know that the reality is that there might be some who will pass that responsibility down. But the principals just need to understand that ultimately anything that happens regarding a student from their school, registration, transfer, whatever, they're ultimately responsible. And so we want to make sure that they're reminded of that responsibility. How they decide to deal with it in their school is up to them. We would hope they would do it themselves, because over the course of a year, there really aren't an awful lot of transfers for a single school that occur. Nathan, in a big year, are you able to let us know what, some of the bigger numbers of transfers are? Would we be 8, 10, 15 at the very most for a very large school? And then small schools might be 1 or 2 or none?
We've seen in the year before, we had about 400 transfers. The year before that was 571. And so divide that amongst all the schools. I think you're right. A large school would be looking at 10 to 15 at the most.
Yeah. So I don't think it's a huge, I really don't think it's a massive issue, Joel. And if anything else, if we can get the principals becoming a little more engaged with the association, just as over the course of the past year, we as an association have become a lot more involved with a variety of groups. we're not normally as involved with. We're involved but not as involved. So superintendents, even our communications with Marvin have been just ongoing throughout the year. I think those continued collaborations and connecting with others is really valuable. And if nothing else, it'll sort of remind the principals that school sport is in the world, and we want them to remember that.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that, and appreciate all the hard work all of you guys have put into these last few months.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much for that. And Marvin, you've got your hand up. Question from Marvin.
No, it's not a question, actually. I just wanted to go back to Leah's points earlier. And I just wanted to share some information that, we've already seen that in initial plans at this point in time, the Alberta Colleges Athletic Conference and Canada West have modified their league schedules already. So the football schedule, for example, for Canada West came out yesterday. They've moved it from 8 games to 6 games for this season. And today they announced the soccer schedule. I didn't have time to cross-reference it. And then just for ACAC reference, as of right now, they're not planning on starting their winter sports schedule, so volleyball, hockey, and basketball, till the middle of November, which is about 3 weeks later than what they would typically start it. So there is some maneuvering that's already being taken place with those organizations. So I think as we work through this, there certainly is going to have to be some give and take and some changes. But, as John mentioned, there's not a lot of flexibility when you're looking at some of the sports that are weather dependent, especially in the fall time. So, we'll have to see how things play out in that regard. So I just wanted to add that, Rick, to the conversation.
Thank you so much. Kate, you're up.
Thanks, Rick. My question is regarding when Deanna was talking about provincial hosting and the possibility that some jurisdictions would have issues or concerns with spectators and stuff. Will that be something ASAA gets involved in the sense that, if the carryover is for everyone that was supposed to host previous championships that have, had them canceled, what happens if 3 out of the 4 volleyball championships are allowed spectators, but whoever hosts 2A, their district says no? Will there be anything, or if say for cross country or something, whoever's scheduled to host, their district says no, but every other district is allowing it? Will ASAA get involved at all in moving a championship to accommodate for spectators if everyone else is allowing for them?
I think you're dealing with a what if, Kate, and I know it's a what if. We have discussed at the executive level how it would be addressed if let's say a school district says our school is hosting this event, but we are going to limit our spectators to 1/3 of the stands. Then that's what we have to follow, because it's that school and that school's jurisdiction. They own the property that the event is on. As well, if the school superintendent says we are not going to allow banquets to accompany our championship, then the executive's not going to force that banquet to occur. I mean, ideally, we'll be back to life as normal. But when it comes to a situation like that, I don't see that the executive has a tendency right now to say we're going to take the championship away from the school and give it to somebody else because they won't allow enough spectators in. I just haven't gotten that sense from them. My sense is that we've got these schools that have stepped up to host. We will let them host. We understand that there may be, and hopefully not, but there may be some restrictions this year. I'm not sure, Rick or Deanna, based on your involvement in the discussions we've had at executive level, or Hank, who's also on the call, if you guys want to add your thoughts on this.
I would just add we have to model what we're saying. Alberta Health, then superintendents, then principals. And if there's a regional abundance of caution, just as we heard from an earlier question in terms of some divisions are going to start later, we can't penalize or shouldn't penalize. We need to follow the decision-making schema that's been laid out and support that. People have various levels of comfort and various regional situations. Let's hope and I think we have plenty of good cause to hope. The announcement yesterday, like 60 new cases, everybody get the shots and away it goes and away we go is kind of my thought there. Hopefully that covers it, Kate. Thanks for the question, though.
No problem. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, and on now to Renelle.
Hi there. Thanks for taking my call. Can you guys hear me okay?
We sure can.
Awesome. Thanks. This would be probably more a question for Marvin in terms of AHS. Has there been thought to, with stage 3, seeing no restrictions, if someone does test positive for COVID and is within a team, are they still going to be considered close contacts? And I guess, what are the protocols going forward? Or maybe you don't have that answer quite yet of what that would look like, but the impact on, you know, teams going to tournaments and obviously playing other teams structure. How does that kind of all pan out?
Marvin?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Raynell. This is certainly not my area of expertise. This would be, you know, Alberta Health will have to determine, you know, what's going to happen. All I can say is that if you take a look at the stage 2 guidance on page 2, there is a section which talks about, you know, close contacts and what happens at this point in time within stage 2.
Right.
So maybe what we can do is we can, Trevor, maybe you can just copy that bullet if you've got that document open and put it in the chat box. But essentially, you know, we need to see what's going to happen with stage 3 and then moving forward. But essentially right now, what it says is that, you know, if AHS determines that a COVID-19 case to be infectious during game practice tournament, all of the members of the teams playing each other during the infectious period of the case will be considered close contacts and be required to quarantine as per the quarantine requirements. So that's as of right now.
Okay.
So what is that going to look like moving forward for stage 3 and then into the fall? I don't know at this point in time what that will look like.
Has there been any thought, I guess, as the executive in terms of, you know, ASAA, like, are we maybe, you said optimistic, you know, cautiously moving our tournament, something that we need to maybe take off the table or look at, obviously, depending on our situation come, you know, fall, to kind of mitigate that risk? Or is it kind of just, again, going to be up to the superintendent and principal to decide?
I think I go back to sort of Rick's comment that if there's an AHS guideline over what happens if there's a case that's determined, then we would simply follow, or the host, the school, the superintendent would follow those guidelines. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question right now.
I'm just thinking, like, if I'm participating in a tournament and then obviously there's a person who tests positive for that, that wipes out so many teams for, you know, a 2-week time period, that would impact, again, league play. It's a trickle down effect. So I'm just trying to think ahead. And
so I'm thinking, Marvin, that might be something to sort of run by Susan Knott, as you know, that I'm assuming something like that would be in the sport guidelines when they come out later in the summer.
Well, and that's what I was saying, John. And I would think, you know, Deanna, we might want to flag this one for the ASAA return to school sport document for when we are ready to circulate that, and just to get some information so that, you know, tournament organizers and coaches and administrators are kind of aware of what the process is going to be at that point in time.
that would be great.
There's so much evolving in this arena. You look at the rules and actions that were taken just a month ago or 6 weeks ago. If a player tested positive, contrasted to this week, Chris Paul tests positive. The rest of the Phoenix Suns keep on playing for various reasons and procedures and levels of vaccination, etc. That's at the NBA level, but clearly that's the kind of evolution that's going to happen over these next several weeks, months, and years.
I would just rather us be proactive in that thinking than, you know, we get into a situation now where we have COVID
Amen.
up at tournaments and then we have everything and we're just trying to recover. So
Yep. Very, very wise. Thank you for bringing that up. Do we have any other questions, comments, or bets on the next Canadians Vegas game? Seeing none, I would like to thank everybody for joining us today for this town hall. there's certainly the possibility of another town hall being offered in late August as we come to start up, depending on the new information that comes before us. In the meantime, congratulations to all of you and all Albertans for getting over 70% so we can have a stampede and get on with things. And thank you very much, Marvin, for spending some time with us. And ladies and gentlemen, all the blessings in the world for a fantastic and well-deserved summer break. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rick. Thanks, Rick. Thanks, Deanna.
Thanks, Rick.
Thanks, Marvin.
That's right. John, can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
With ASAA registrations trying to get a jump on them for the fall, or like, can we still be doing those up until when would they still be kind of looked at or get started, or?
Now, are you talking the student athlete registrations getting ahead of
Yeah,
those
for the
fall
fall,
transfer?
and for one would be a transfer from another school. So I wanted to get that one going because I knew that it's going to take time.
Yeah, I would get going on the transfer as soon as possible. Normally we wait until about mid-August before we start processing transfers because we want to try to discourage kids from testing the waters. Will I get approved? Will I not? But just given the last year that we've had, we are processing transfers as they're coming in. So go ahead and get your transfers done. As far as your student athlete registrations go, the SRS goes through a rollover to the next year where the data from the previous year is deleted. Right. The kids will still be in the system, but you would have to re-add them in for every team they're going to be involved in. Anything to add there, Deanna?
Yeah, you kind of touched on it at the end there. Hi, Matt.
Hey.
It's really just that if you are registering students in the system, make sure you are registering them for what they would be in this school year. So if they're a grade 10 in this school year, register them right now as of this school year, because in the end of July, we're going to roll over the sport registration system and all data will be transferred to what will apply for the next school year. So if they're starting grade 11 next year, make sure you register them as a grade 10 right now, or as a grade 11 when you get back from summer break.
So you could get ahead of next year if you got a bunch of 10s that you know haven't played anything this year, haven't been in the system. You could put them in, and then we'll just roll them over, so you don't have to re-enter them.
Right. Okay. Thanks, guys.
Good question.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye, Matt.
Any other questions, folks? We've still got a few people on the line. I see that that handlebar mustache of Rick Haynes in there. Can't miss it. Good to see you, Rick. Okay, looks like most people are leaving, so we might as well sign off. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of the day. By the way, it's a beautiful one out there.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, I'm off.